Good morning and welcome to another day marked for favor. Before the weekend routines pull you into rest mode, before you settle into the slower pace of a Saturday, heaven wants to remind you that favor does not take days off. Today is not just a day to relax and recover from the week behind you. Today is a day of divine promotion, a day when God positions you in places you did not fight your way into, a day when doors open not because of who you know or what you have accumulated, but simply because favor has been assigned to your name. Somewhere reading this right now, there is a person who has worked hard, stayed faithful, kept showing up, and yet still feels overlooked, passed over for the promotion, unnoticed for the opportunity, waiting for someone to finally recognize what they carry. I want you to know promotion does not always come from the hands you expect. Sometimes it comes suddenly, unexpectedly, from a source you never saw coming, because favor is not limited to human recognition. It flows from the hand of God, and what he promotes, no one can demote. So wherever you are, sipping your coffee, sitting in the quiet of a Saturday morning, or already moving through your to-do list, get ready, because today we are not simply hoping for a good break. We are declaring divine favor over our lives, decreeing unexpected blessings, unearned promotions, and open doors that were prepared for us before we even knew to ask. Take a deep breath, lift your expectation, and let's step into this day of favor together, because promotion is coming, and it is coming now. There is a quiet exhaustion that settles into the soul of someone who has spent years believing that merit alone determines outcome, that if they simply work hard enough, prepare thoroughly enough, and perform well enough, the doors they are seeking will eventually have no choice but to open. This belief feels reasonable on the surface. It aligns with everything we are taught about fairness, about cause and effect, about the world operating according to a logic where effort and reward are directly and predictably connected. But anyone who has lived long enough has also witnessed the uncomfortable reality that this logic does not always hold. There are people who work tirelessly, who prepare meticulously, who check every box that merit supposedly requires, and yet remain on the outside of doors that others, with far less obvious qualification, seem to walk through with surprising ease. This discrepancy is not always injustice, though sometimes it certainly is. Often it is evidence of something operating alongside merit that merit alone cannot explain. Favor, an unearned, unmerited advantage that opens what qualification by itself could never unlock. Consider what merit actually accomplishes, and just as importantly, what it does not accomplish. Merit builds competence. It develops skill, sharpens ability, and establishes credibility. These are genuinely valuable outcomes, and no honest conversation about favor should be mistaken for an argument against diligence, preparation, or hard work. Merit matters. But merit, however genuine, operates within a limited sphere of influence. It can make a person qualified. It cannot by itself guarantee that qualification will be recognized, noticed, or rewarded by those who hold the power to open doors. Countless qualified people exist in the world who never received the recognition their qualification would seem to deserve, simply because qualification alone does not automatically translate into opportunity. Something else has to intervene. Some force has to create the actual moment of connection between preparedness and platform. And this is precisely where favor operates in a way merit alone never could. This distinction between merit and favor becomes especially important for anyone who has grown discouraged after years of faithful effort that has not yet produced the breakthrough they were hoping for. If merit alone determined outcome, then continued lack of breakthrough, despite continued diligence, would logically suggest something insufficient about the effort itself, some flaw in preparation that simply needs to be corrected through more work, more study, more refinement. This conclusion, while sometimes accurate, is not always accurate, and clinging to it exclusively can produce a particularly damaging kind of self-blame in people whose actual qualification is not the primary obstacle standing between them and their breakthrough. Sometimes the missing ingredient is not more merit. It is favor, an entirely different category of provision that does not respond to increased effort in the same way that skill development does. This raises an important question about what favor actually is, distinct from merit, and how it operates according to a logic that often defies conventional explanation. Favor can be understood as unearned advantage, a disposition of goodwill extended towards someone not because they have proven themselves worthy of it through accumulated achievement, but because grace has been extended toward them from a source beyond their own effort. This unearned quality is precisely what makes favor so difficult for many people to fully embrace, because it contradicts a deeply ingrained belief that anything genuinely valuable must be earned through proportional effort. We have been trained, often from childhood, to believe that receiving something without having specifically earned it feels somehow illegitimate, undeserved, perhaps even a little suspicious. But favor operates according to an entirely different logic than the transactional world we have been trained to expect. And learning to receive favor requires unlearning some of this transactional conditioning that tells us worth must always be proven before benefit can be received. There is something worth examining about why favor tends to make people uncomfortable, particularly people who have built their identity around diligence, hard work, and self-sufficiency. For someone whose sense of worth is deeply tied to what they have personally earned through effort, favor can feel almost threatening because it suggests that outcomes are not entirely within their own control, that something beyond their own effort and merit plays a significant role in determining what doors open and what doors remain closed. This can feel destabilizing to a person who has organized their entire approach to life around the principle that hard work guarantees proportional reward. But this discomfort, while understandable, often needs to be worked through rather than avoided, because refusing to acknowledge and receive favor when it is genuinely being extended can actually become an obstacle to walking through doors that favor alone has made accessible. This is where a particular kind of humility becomes necessary, a willingness to acknowledge that our own effort, however genuine and however necessary, is not the sole factor determining our outcomes. This humility does not diminish the value of hard work or suggest that effort is unnecessary. It simply positions effort correctly as one important factor among several, rather than as the singular, all-determining variable controlling every outcome we experience. When we can hold this more accurate, more humble understanding, we free ourselves to actually receive favor when it appears, rather than unconsciously sabotaging or dismissing opportunities that arrive through favor, because they do not fit our preconceived notion that everything valuable must be proportionally earned through effort we can point to and take credit for. There is also something significant about how favor tends to operate specifically in situations where merit alone has reached its limit, where the person seeking breakthrough has genuinely done everything within their power to prepare, to qualify, to develop the skill and competence required, and yet still finds themselves standing before a closed door that their qualification alone has not been sufficient to open. This is not a failure of their preparation. It is simply the natural limit of what merit operating alone is capable of accomplishing. Merit gets a person to the threshold. It rarely by itself is what actually walks a person through the door. This is precisely the gap that favor exists to fill, stepping into the space between qualification and opportunity, providing the additional element that allows genuine preparation to finally connect with genuine platform. This means that recognizing the limits of merit is not an admission of personal inadequacy, but an accurate acknowledgement of how doors of significant opportunity actually tend to open in the real world. Very few substantial breakthroughs occur purely through individual merit operating in isolation from any external factor of grace connection or unexpected opportunity. Almost every significant advancement anyone experiences involves some combination of personal preparation, meeting an external factor that person did not fully control or manufacture through their own effort alone, a chance encounter, an unexpected recommendation, a decision maker who happened to notice something at exactly the right moment, circumstances aligning in ways that could not have been engineered through effort alone. This external factor is favor, and recognizing its role does not diminish the genuine value of the preparation that made a person ready to receive it once it appeared. There is a particular kind of prayer and posture that becomes appropriate once this distinction between merit and favor is genuinely understood. Rather than praying exclusively for increased ability to work harder, to prepare more thoroughly, To somehow earn our way through doors that our current qualification has not yet been sufficient to unlock, we can also pray specifically for favor, asking for the unearned advantage that operates alongside our merit rather than replacing the need for it. This kind of prayer does not suggest we should stop preparing or working diligently while we wait for favor to intervene. It suggests we should hold both realities simultaneously, continuing to develop genuine competence through consistent effort, while also actively seeking and expecting favor to provide the connection, the opportunity, the unexpected door that merit alone has not yet been able to produce despite genuine, sustained effort. This dual posture, combining diligent preparation with expectant trust and favor, reflects a more complete and more accurate understanding of how breakthrough actually tends to occur. It avoids two common errors that people often fall into when thinking about the relationship between effort and grace. The first error is relying exclusively on merit, working endlessly while never actually expecting or praying for favor, operating as though outcomes are entirely within personal control, and any lack of breakthrough must therefore reflect insufficient effort, requiring even more work. This error often produces exhaustion, burnout, and a persistent, gnawing sense that no amount of effort ever feels sufficient. The second error is relying exclusively on favor while neglecting genuine preparation, expecting doors to open without any corresponding diligence to ensure that when they do open, there is genuine substance and competence ready to walk through them. This error often produces missed opportunities, situations where favor genuinely extends an opening, but the underlying lack of preparation prevents that opening from being sustained or stewarded well once it arrives. The healthiest posture avoids both extremes, holding genuine diligence and genuine expectation of favor together, understanding that both are necessary and that neither alone is sufficient to produce the kind of breakthrough being sought. This balanced posture allows a person to work hard without the crushing weight of believing every outcome depends entirely on their own effort, while also actively expecting and praying for favor without using that expectation as an excuse to neglect genuine preparation. When both elements are present together, diligent preparation combined with expectant trust in unearned favor, the doors that neither element alone could have opened often begin to swing open in ways that surprise even the person who has been faithfully preparing and expectantly praying all along. Understanding favor as something entirely distinct from merit, capable of opening what qualification by itself cannot unlock, ultimately offers significant relief to anyone who has grown weary from believing their breakthrough depends entirely on their own accumulated effort. It does not diminish the real value of hard work, preparation, or genuine competence. It simply positions these things accurately as necessary but not solely sufficient, making room for favor to operate as the additional unearned grace that so often provides exactly the connection, the timing, and the opportunity that merit alone, however genuine and however diligently pursued, was never actually designed to produce on its own. There is a particular myth embedded so deeply in how most people think about advancement that they rarely stop to question it. And that myth is the assumption that promotion must always be the product of prolonged, visible struggle, that the harder and longer someone fights for their breakthrough, the more legitimate and sustainable that breakthrough will eventually be when it finally arrives. This assumption feels intuitive because it mirrors the narrative arc we have absorbed from countless stories, where the protagonist earns their triumph through an extended trial, where suffering is treated as the necessary currency that must be paid before reward can be legitimately claimed. But this narrative, however emotionally satisfying, does not accurately reflect how divine promotion actually tends to operate. Divine promotion frequently arrives not at the culmination of a long, visible struggle, but suddenly, unexpectedly, often in a moment that catches everyone, including the person being promoted, entirely off guard. Consider how differently this pattern unfolds compared to the story we typically tell ourselves about how advancement is supposed to work. In the conventional narrative, promotion is the direct, proportional reward for visible struggle. The longer and harder someone fights, the more they have supposedly earned, and the more dramatic and satisfying their eventual breakthrough should be when it finally arrives. This narrative places enormous emphasis on the struggle itself, almost treating suffering as a prerequisite that must be sufficiently endured before promotion can be considered legitimate. But divine promotion operates according to an entirely different pattern, one where the connection between the length of struggle and the timing of breakthrough is far less predictable and far less proportional than the conventional narrative suggests. Some people experience remarkably sudden elevation after only a relatively brief period of preparation, while others endure extended seasons of struggle that seem to bear little direct relationship to the eventual timing of their promotion when it finally does arrive. This unpredictability can feel disorienting, particularly for anyone who has organized their expectations around the assumption that sufficient struggle will eventually and predictably produce proportional reward. When promotion does not arrive according to this expected timeline, despite what feels like more than sufficient struggle already endured, the temptation is to conclude that something has gone wrong, that perhaps the struggle simply has not yet reached the necessary threshold, requiring even more prolonged difficulty before breakthrough can finally be considered earned. But this conclusion misunderstands the actual nature of divine promotion, which does not operate according to a fixed exchange rate, where a specific quantity of struggle guarantees a corresponding quantity of eventual reward. Divine promotion often arrives suddenly precisely because it was never actually dependent on the length or intensity of struggle in the first place. There is something significant about the word suddenly that deserves careful attention because it suggests a quality of unexpectedness, a breakthrough that arrives without extensive advance warning, catching the recipient in the middle of ordinary faithfulness rather than at the deliberately orchestrated conclusion of a long, visible campaign of struggle. This suddenness is not accidental or incidental to how divine promotion works. It appears to be characteristic of the pattern itself, a consistent feature rather than an occasional exception. This means that anyone waiting for promotion should not necessarily expect it to arrive gradually, incrementally, or as the predictable culmination of an extended, visible struggle that everyone around them has been watching unfold. It may instead arrive abruptly in a single unexpected moment that transforms circumstances far more rapidly than the preceding struggle would have led anyone to anticipate. This pattern of sudden promotion offers particular encouragement to anyone who has grown weary of waiting, who has begun to interpret the length of their current struggle as evidence that breakthrough remains distant, requiring still more time and still more difficulty before it can possibly arrive. If divine promotion genuinely operates according to sudden timing rather than strictly proportional struggle, then the length of a current season of difficulty does not necessarily predict how much longer that difficulty must continue before breakthrough finally occurs. Promotion could, in principle, arrive far sooner than the accumulated weight of struggle would seem to suggest, precisely because its timing is not actually determined primarily by struggle's duration in the first place. This does not mean struggle serves no purpose during the waiting season, but it does mean the relationship between struggle and breakthrough is not as simply proportional as the conventional narrative assumes. It is worth examining why this sudden pattern of promotion tends to occur, rather than the more gradual, incremental advancement that might seem more intuitively fair or predictable. Part of the explanation may lie in how divine promotion often involves factors entirely outside the control or awareness of the person being promoted, factors that must align in ways that are simply not visible from the perspective of someone in the midst of their own struggle. A decision maker's circumstances change unexpectedly. A position becomes available through someone else's unrelated transition. A connection forms through an entirely unplanned encounter. These external factors, invisible to the person waiting, are often quietly aligning behind the scenes throughout the entire duration of what feels like unrewarded struggle. And when they finally converge, the resulting promotion appears sudden specifically because the person experiencing it had no visibility into the gradual alignment that had actually been occurring all along, hidden from their perspective. This suggests that what feels like sudden promotion from the perspective of the person receiving it may not actually be sudden at all from a broader vantage point. It may simply be the visible manifestation of a process that had been unfolding gradually and invisibly throughout the entire preceding season, a process the person experiencing the struggle was not positioned to observe because so much of it involves circumstances, decisions, and alignments happening entirely outside their own sphere of awareness. This reframing matters because it suggests that the seemingly unrewarded struggle preceding sudden promotion was not actually disconnected from the eventual breakthrough. It may have been an essential part of the process the entire time, even though its connection to the eventual outcome remained invisible until the moment breakthrough finally arrived and revealed, in retrospect, how the various pieces had actually been coming together all along. There is also something worth considering about how the sudden nature of divine promotion tends to interrupt and disrupt the very narrative of struggle a person has been building around their own identity during an extended season of waiting. When struggle continues for a long time without apparent resolution, people often begin to construct an entire self-understanding around that struggle, developing a narrative of themselves as someone who has been overlooked, someone whose breakthrough requires continued, perhaps indefinite, endurance before it can possibly arrive. This narrative, while understandable given the genuine difficulty of prolonged waiting, can become so deeply internalized that it actually begins to shape expectations in ways that make sudden promotion feel almost disorienting when it finally does occur, precisely because it interrupts a story of struggle the person had become accustomed to living inside of. This disorientation, while uncomfortable, is worth naming honestly because it reveals something important about how deeply we can become attached to our own narratives of struggle, sometimes without even realizing how thoroughly that narrative has shaped our expectations and our sense of identity. Learning to hold space for sudden promotion requires a certain flexibility, a willingness to release the narrative of prolonged struggle even while that struggle is still actively being endured. Maintaining enough openness to actually recognize and receive sudden breakthrough when it finally arrives, rather than remaining so entrenched in the story of ongoing difficulty that the arrival of unexpected promotion feels almost unbelievable or unearned when it finally does occur. There is a practical implication embedded in understanding promotion as sudden rather than strictly proportional to struggle, and that implication involves maintaining active readiness even during seasons when breakthrough feels distant or improbable. If promotion could arrive suddenly without extensive advance warning, then remaining prepared, alert, and ready to receive it becomes essential precisely because we cannot predict exactly when that sudden moment will occur. A person who assumes promotion must follow a long, predictable timeline of visible struggle might relax their preparation during what feels like an ordinary, unremarkable season, only to be caught unprepared when sudden opportunity actually arrives ahead of their expected schedule. But a person who understands the sudden nature of divine promotion tends to maintain continuous readiness, understanding that any given ordinary day, regardless of how unremarkable it currently feels, could actually be the day that sudden breakthrough finally occurs. This continuous readiness does not require living in a state of constant anxious anticipation, scanning every moment for signs that promotion might be imminent. It requires instead a settled, sustainable posture of faithful preparation maintained consistently over time, trusting that this preparation positions a person to actually receive sudden promotion whenever it does arrive, rather than being caught unprepared by its unexpected timing. This posture reflects a particular kind of patient faithfulness, continuing to develop skill, maintain relationships, and steward current responsibilities well, not because these efforts alone guarantee promotion's arrival, but because they ensure that when sudden promotion does occur, there is genuine substance and readiness available to actually receive and sustain it. There is also comfort available in recognizing that sudden promotion, precisely because it does not depend primarily on the length or visibility of struggle, remains available even to those whose current season of difficulty feels particularly prolonged or particularly severe. If promotion depended strictly on proportional struggle, then those experiencing especially difficult seasons might reasonably assume their eventual reward, when it finally arrives, must be correspondingly delayed even further to match the severity of what they have already endured. But if promotion operates according to sudden, unpredictable timing rather than strict proportionality, then even the most extended, most difficult seasons of struggle remain genuinely open to sudden, unexpected breakthrough that could arrive at any moment, regardless of how long or how severe the preceding difficulty has already been. Understanding divine promotion as something that tends to arrive suddenly rather than as the predictable culmination of proportional struggle ultimately offers a particular kind of hope that the conventional narrative of earned incremental advancement could never fully provide. It suggests that no matter how long a current season of waiting has already lasted, no matter how invisible any sign of progress currently appears, breakthrough remains genuinely possible at any moment, arriving not because sufficient struggle has finally accumulated to the necessary threshold, but because favor operates according to its own timing, a timing capable of interrupting even the most prolonged and difficult seasons with sudden, unexpected elevation that transforms circumstances far more rapidly than the preceding struggle would have ever led anyone to reasonably expect. There is a particular fear that lingers beneath the surface of even genuine breakthrough, a quiet, nagging concern that whatever has been gained could just as easily be taken away, that elevation achieved is never truly secure, that somewhere out there exists a person, a circumstance, or a force powerful enough to reverse what has been so hard won. This fear is not irrational. Life has taught most people through painful experience that gains can indeed be lost, that positions can be undermined, that what took years to build can sometimes be dismantled with startling speed by forces entirely outside personal control. But there is an important distinction to be made between elevation that comes through purely human means and elevation that has been specifically established by divine hand. And this distinction offers a particular kind of security that purely human advancement can never fully guarantee. What God elevates carries a permanence that human promotion, however impressive, simply cannot replicate on its own, because what God establishes, no human agency possesses the ultimate authority to permanently pull down. Consider the fundamental difference between these two categories of elevation. Human promotion, however legitimate and however deserved, remains subject to human authority throughout its entire duration. A position granted by human decision can be revoked by that same human decision or by a different human decision made by whoever eventually holds authority over that position in the future. This vulnerability is simply inherent to any elevation that depends entirely on ongoing human approval for its continuation. But elevation that has been specifically established through divine favor operates according to an entirely different structure of authority. It does not depend solely on the ongoing approval of any particular human gatekeeper, because its ultimate source of authorization exists above and beyond human jurisdiction altogether. This does not mean divinely established elevation is immune to every form of opposition or challenge. It means that opposition, however real, does not possess the ultimate authority to permanently reverse what has been divinely established, regardless of how forcefully that opposition attempts to assert itself. This distinction matters enormously for how a person approaches the season following genuine breakthrough, because the anxiety that so often accompanies newly acquired position or opportunity frequently stems from an unconscious assumption that this elevation exists entirely within the same vulnerable category as purely human advancement, subject at every moment to the whims of whoever currently holds authority to grant or revoke it. This assumption produces a particular kind of chronic insecurity, a nagging sense that current position must be constantly defended, constantly protected, constantly justified against potential challenge, because its continuation feels perpetually uncertain. But if elevation has actually been established by divine hand rather than purely through human mechanism, this chronic insecurity, however understandable given past experience, does not accurately reflect the actual security of the position now held. There is something significant about examining historical patterns of people who experience genuine divine elevation despite facing intense, sustained opposition, specifically intended to reverse or prevent that elevation from taking hold. In numerous accounts throughout Scripture, individuals who had been genuinely elevated by divine favor faced determined efforts by jealous rivals, threatened authorities, or conspiring adversaries to strip away exactly what had been divinely granted. Yet in case after case, these determined efforts, however sustained and however seemingly powerful, ultimately failed to permanently reverse what divine favor had established. This pattern is not merely coincidental. It reflects a consistent principle regarding the nature of divinely established elevation, that it carries a security fundamentally different from elevation that depends entirely on human goodwill for its continuation. This does not mean that people who experience divine elevation never face genuine opposition, difficulty, or even temporary setback in the process of maintaining what has been granted to them. Opposition to divine elevation is in fact remarkably common, almost to be expected as a natural response from those who feel threatened, displaced, or envious of what someone else has received. The presence of opposition should not be interpreted as evidence that the elevation itself was somehow illegitimate or destined to fail. Rather, opposition often serves as confirmation that something significant has genuinely occurred, because purely inconsequential advancement rarely provokes the kind of determined resistance that genuinely consequential elevation frequently attracts. The intensity of opposition faced can, in a strange way, become a form of evidence pointing toward the genuine significance of what has actually been established. Understanding this pattern should change how a person interprets opposition encountered after experiencing genuine breakthrough or promotion. Rather than interpreting opposition as an immediate threat capable of permanently undoing what has been received, opposition can instead be understood as an expected, almost predictable feature of the landscape surrounding genuine divine elevation, a feature that does not carry the ultimate authority to reverse what has actually been established by a higher source than the opposition itself represents. This reframing does not mean opposition should be dismissed as inconsequential or approached carelessly without wisdom and appropriate response. It means opposition can be faced from a place of settled confidence rather than desperate anxiety, trusting that its ultimate power to permanently undo divine elevation is significantly more limited than its immediate intensity might initially suggest. There is also something worth exploring about why this security exists specifically for elevation that has been divinely established rather than purely humanly achieved. And this explanation returns to the fundamental question of ultimate authority and jurisdiction. Every human authority, however powerful within its own limited sphere, operates within boundaries established by a higher authority that supersedes it. A human gatekeeper might possess genuine power to grant or deny opportunity within their own specific domain. But this power, however real, remains subordinate to a broader jurisdiction that human gatekeepers do not ultimately control. When elevation has been established by this higher jurisdiction, rather than merely through the isolated decision of a single human gatekeeper, that elevation carries an authorization that exceeds what any human gatekeeper, however determined, actually possesses the capacity to permanently override. This hierarchical understanding of authority offers particular comfort to anyone who has experienced genuine breakthrough, only to immediately face determined human opposition seeking to reverse or diminish what has been received. The relevant question is not simply whether a particular human opponent possesses genuine power or determination to attempt reversal, because genuine power and determination to attempt reversal are not the same as ultimate authority to actually accomplish permanent reversal. Human opponents may indeed possess real power within their own limited sphere, capable of causing genuine difficulty, delay, or temporary setback. But this real, limited power does not equate to the ultimate authority required to permanently undo what a higher jurisdiction has specifically established. And this distinction between limited human power and ultimate divine authority is precisely where security for the divinely elevated person actually resides. There is a practical wisdom embedded in this understanding that shapes how a person should actually respond when facing opposition following genuine promotion or breakthrough. Rather than responding from a place of desperate defensiveness, expending enormous energy trying to personally neutralize every threat or challenge that arises, a person who trusts in the security of divinely established elevation can respond with a calmer, more measured confidence, taking wise and appropriate action where necessary, while trusting that the ultimate outcome does not depend entirely on their own ability to successfully counter every single challenge that opposition might raise. This does not mean passivity or ignoring genuine threats that require appropriate response. It means engaging those threats from a foundation of security rather than desperation, trusting that the ultimate preservation of what has been divinely established does not rest solely on personal strategic brilliance, but on the reliability of the authority that established the elevation in the first place. This security also offers something significant regarding how a person processes the emotional experience of facing envy, jealousy, or resentment from others following genuine promotion. It is a common and painful experience for people who receive genuine advancement to encounter resentment from those who feel overlooked, displaced, or threatened by that advancement. This resentment can produce significant emotional distress, particularly when it comes from people within close personal or professional relationships. But understanding that divinely established elevation does not depend on universal approval or the absence of resentment from others can help a person navigate this difficult relational dynamic without becoming so consumed by anxiety about others' reactions that they begin second-guessing or apologizing for elevation that was genuinely deserved and genuinely granted. This is not a license to dismiss legitimate relational concerns or to behave with arrogance toward those who struggle with envy. It is simply a reminder that the security of genuine elevation does not depend on successfully managing every person's emotional response to that elevation. There is also something worth considering about how this principle applies not only to positions of visible prominence, but to every category of genuine divine elevation, including restored relationships, healed circumstances, and renewed opportunities that might not carry the obvious visibility of a formal promotion, but nonetheless represent genuine advancement established through divine favor rather than purely human achievement. The same security that applies to a formal position of authority applies equally to these less visible but equally significant forms of elevation. What has been divinely restored in a relationship cannot be permanently undone by those who might prefer to see that restoration fail. What has been divinely healed cannot be permanently reversed by circumstances or opposition seeking to reintroduce the original affliction. The principle of security applies broadly across every category of genuine divine elevation, not merely to the specific category of career or positional advancement that might come most immediately to mind when discussing promotion. Understanding that what God elevates cannot be permanently pulled down by human opposition ultimately offers a foundation of security that allows a person to actually enjoy and steward their breakthrough rather than living in constant, exhausting fear that it might be suddenly and permanently reversed. This security does not eliminate the reality of opposition, challenge, or even occasional temporary setback that might occur even in the midst of genuine divine elevation. But it does provide the settled confidence that these challenges, however real and however difficult to navigate in the moment, do not possess the ultimate authority to permanently undo what has been established by a source far greater than any human opposition could ever hope to overcome, allowing genuine breakthrough to be received, stewarded, and enjoyed rather than perpetually defended against a threat that, in its ultimate outcome, has already been decisively answered. There is a particular kind of joy that exists nowhere else in human experience, quite like the joy of receiving something we never saw coming, something we had not calculated, planned for, or even dared to specifically hope for because it seemed too far outside the realm of what we thought was reasonably possible. This joy is different from the satisfaction of achieving a carefully planned goal, different from the relief of finally reaching a target we have been diligently working toward for years. It carries an element of wonder, of delighted astonishment, precisely because it arrived without warning, without the buildup of anticipation that typically accompanies things we have been consciously pursuing. This particular quality of unexpectedness is not incidental to how favor operates. It is in many ways the very signature of favor itself, the distinctive mark that distinguishes favor's activity from the more predictable incremental progress that comes through ordinary effort and planning. Consider what it actually means for a blessing to be unexpected and why this quality carries such particular significance rather than being merely a pleasant but incidental feature of how good things sometimes happen to arrive. An unexpected blessing, by definition, was not something we had specifically requested, planned for, or worked toward in any direct, calculated way. This absence of direct causation is precisely what makes unexpected blessings such powerful evidence of favor actively at work, because they cannot be explained through the ordinary logic of effort producing proportional reward. When we receive exactly what we worked hard to achieve, the natural explanation is straightforward. Our effort produced the result we were pursuing. But when we receive something we never specifically pursued, something that arrives seemingly out of nowhere, disconnected from any deliberate strategy we had been executing, the explanation cannot be reduced to simple cause and effect. Something beyond our own effort was clearly at work, and this is precisely the signature that favor consistently leaves behind wherever it operates. This unexpected quality serves a particular function that deserves careful reflection, because it removes any possibility of taking full personal credit for the blessing received. When we achieve something through purely calculated effort, there remains, understandably, a temptation to attribute the outcome entirely to our own skill, our own strategy, our own hard work, sometimes forgetting or minimizing whatever role grace might have also played in the process. But when a blessing arrives entirely unexpectedly, disconnected from any deliberate pursuit on our part, this temptation toward exclusive self-credit becomes far more difficult to sustain. The very unexpectedness of the blessing forces an honest acknowledgement that something beyond our own effort was clearly responsible for what we received, because we cannot logically credit ourselves for planning and executing something we never actually planned or pursued in the first place. This built-in humility is one of the quiet gifts embedded within unexpected blessings, an automatic check against the pride that can sometimes accompany purely self-attributed achievement. There is something worth exploring about why favor so consistently operates through this pattern of unexpectedness rather than through more predictable, incremental channels that we could anticipate and prepare for in advance. Part of the explanation may lie in the very nature of what favor is designed to accomplish. If favor operated in a fully predictable, calculable manner, it would essentially become indistinguishable from merit, simply another category of outcome that could be pursued and manufactured through sufficiently sophisticated strategy. But favor exists specifically as something distinct from merit, something that cannot be manufactured through calculation alone, and its unexpected quality may be precisely what preserves this distinction, ensuring that favor remains recognizably different from the predictable results of pure human effort and strategic planning. This distinction matters because it protects something important about the nature of grace itself. Grace, by definition, is unearned, unmerited, extended freely, rather than in response to calculated effort designed specifically to produce it. If favor could be reliably predicted, calculated, and manufactured through sufficiently sophisticated technique, it would cease to function as genuine grace and would instead become simply another sophisticated form of merit, a more advanced strategy for producing predictable outcomes through calculated effort. The unexpectedness of favor's typical arrival preserves its essential character as genuine, unearned grace, precisely because this unexpectedness cannot be reverse engineered or reliably reproduced through even the most careful, sophisticated strategic planning. There is also something significant about how the unexpected nature of favor's blessings tends to interrupt and disrupt the narrow, often limited scope of what we ourselves would have imagined asking for, had we been left entirely to our own imagination and planning. Human imagination, however creative, tends to operate within certain boundaries shaped by our past experiences, our current understanding of what seems realistically possible, and our existing sense of what we believe we deserve or are capable of achieving. Favor frequently exceeds these self-imposed boundaries, delivering blessings that we would not have thought to specifically request because they simply had not occurred to us as realistic possibilities within our own limited imagination. This is part of what makes unexpected blessings feel so remarkable when they arrive. They represent an expansion beyond what we ourselves would have known to ask for. revealing a generosity that operates according to a scope larger than our own limited capacity to imagine and request. This pattern offers a particular kind of encouragement to anyone who has grown discouraged by the limitations of their own imagination regarding what might be possible for their future. If favor were limited strictly to delivering exactly what we specifically requested, our own limited imagination would effectively become the ceiling determining the outer boundary of what we could ever hope to receive. But because favor consistently demonstrates a pattern of exceeding specific requests, delivering unexpected blessings that surpass what we ourselves would have known to ask for, this ceiling imposed by our own limited imagination does not actually constrain what remains genuinely possible. There is room for blessing beyond what we currently have the capacity to specifically envision. And this room is precisely where favor's unexpected signature move tends to operate most powerfully. There is something worth considering about how this understanding should shape the posture we bring to prayer and expectation, particularly regarding the specific versus general nature of what we ask for. While there is genuine value in specific targeted prayer and declaration, as discussed extensively in other contexts, there is also value in holding space for blessing that exceeds our own specific requests, remaining open to receiving what we did not think to ask for, precisely because favor so often operates through exactly this kind of unexpected generosity. This suggests a posture that combines specific faith-filled prayer regarding particular needs and desires, while simultaneously maintaining an open, expectant posture toward blessings that might arrive entirely outside the scope of what we have specifically requested, trusting that favor's generosity often extends well beyond the boundaries of our own limited imagination and specific petition. This openness to unexpected blessing requires a particular kind of trust, a willingness to release tight control over exactly how and through what specific channel our breakthrough must arrive. Many people, understandably, develop very specific expectations about exactly what form their answered prayer should take, exactly which doors should open, exactly which opportunity should materialize. This specificity, while sometimes helpful for focused prayer, can also inadvertently become a limitation, causing us to potentially overlook or dismiss genuine blessing that arrives through an unexpected channel, simply because it does not match the very specific expectation we had constructed in our own minds. Cultivating openness to unexpected blessing means holding our specific expectations with a degree of flexibility, trusting that favor might deliver something even better than what we had specifically envisioned, arriving through a channel we never anticipated. There is also something significant about how recognizing unexpected blessings as favor's signature move should shape our posture of ongoing attentiveness and gratitude throughout daily life. If unexpected blessing represents one of the primary ways favor consistently operates, then cultivating the habit of actively noticing and acknowledging these unexpected gifts, however small they might initially appear, becomes an important spiritual discipline. Many unexpected blessings likely pass by unnoticed or unacknowledged simply because we are not actively watching for them, expecting instead only the more predictable, calculated outcomes we have specifically planned and worked toward. Developing a habit of actively noticing unexpected gifts, however minor, trains our attention toward recognizing favor's activity more consistently, building a growing awareness of just how frequently favor is actually operating in our lives, even in the smaller, unexpected moments that might otherwise pass by entirely unnoticed and unappreciated. This cultivated attentiveness also tends to produce a compounding effect on our overall posture of faith and expectation. The more consistently we notice and acknowledge unexpected blessings as they occur, however small, the more our confidence grows regarding favor's genuine, ongoing activity in our lives. This growing confidence, in turn, tends to produce greater openness and expectation toward future unexpected blessing, creating a positive cycle where noticed blessing produces increased faith, which produces increased openness, which positions us to notice and receive even more unexpected blessing moving forward. Conversely, a posture that fails to actively notice or acknowledge unexpected blessing when it occurs tends to produce the opposite cycle, a diminishing awareness of favor's activity that can eventually lead to genuine doubt about whether favor is operating in our lives at all, simply because its evidence has gone unnoticed and unacknowledged over an extended period. Understanding unexpected blessings as favor's characteristic signature move ultimately reframes how we should approach both our prayer life and our daily attentiveness to what is actually happening around us. Rather than limiting our expectations strictly to the specific outcomes we have consciously requested and strategically pursued, we can hold space for a broader, more expansive category of blessing that arrives precisely because it was not specifically calculated or anticipated in advance. This openness does not diminish the value of specific faith-filled prayer and diligent effort, but it does expand our overall posture of expectation beyond the narrow boundaries of our own limited imagination, trusting that favor consistently demonstrates a pattern of generosity that exceeds specific requests, delivering unexpected gifts precisely because this unexpectedness is not an occasional exception to how favor operates, but is in fact one of its most consistent and recognizable characteristics. There is a particular ache that accompanies feeling overlooked, an ache that goes deeper than simple disappointment over a missed opportunity, because being overlooked carries within it an implicit message about worth, a quiet suggestion that we were seen, considered, and ultimately judged not significant enough to warrant selection. This ache tends to compound over time, especially when the experience of being overlooked repeats itself across multiple seasons, multiple opportunities, multiple contexts where recognition seemed reasonable to expect and yet consistently failed to materialize. After enough repetition, a person can begin to internalize being overlooked as a kind of permanent identity, a settled conclusion about their place in the world, as though they have been quietly categorized as someone destined to remain in the background while others receive the visibility, the opportunity, and the increase that seems to elude them no matter how faithfully they continue showing up. This internalized conclusion, however understandable given repeated painful experience, does not reflect the actual trajectory that has been established for anyone walking in genuine covenant relationship with a God who specializes in positioning the overlooked for increase, not permanently overlooking them, but preparing them precisely for the increase that patient faithfulness is quietly cultivating even during seasons that feel entirely stagnant. Consider the difference between being temporarily unrecognized and being permanently forgotten, because these two experiences, while producing similar emotional pain in the moment, actually represent entirely different underlying realities. Being temporarily unrecognized means that visibility and opportunity have not yet arrived, but the door toward eventual increase remains genuinely open, still being prepared, still moving toward an eventual moment of recognition that simply has not yet occurred. Being permanently forgotten, by contrast, would mean that no such door exists at all, that increase has been permanently foreclosed, that the current season of invisibility represents not a temporary condition, but a fixed, unchangeable destiny. The emotional experience of prolonged waiting often makes these two very different realities feel indistinguishable from the inside, because both produce the same immediate sensation of being overlooked in the present moment. But understanding the crucial difference between these two categories matters enormously, because only one of them, permanent forgottenness, would actually justify complete resignation and abandonment of hope. Temporary unrecognized status, however painful and however extended, remains fundamentally different because it exists within a trajectory that is actively moving toward eventual increase, even during the very seasons when that movement remains entirely invisible to the person currently experiencing it. There is something worth examining about why seasons of being overlooked often precede rather than prevent significant eventual increase, a pattern that appears with remarkable consistency throughout accounts of people who eventually experience substantial elevation after extended periods of obscurity. This pattern is not simply coincidental. It suggests something purposeful about how positioning for increase actually tends to work, that the season of being overlooked often serves a specific preparatory function precisely because it operates outside the pressure, scrutiny, and premature exposure that early visibility would have introduced. A person developed in relative obscurity has space to grow, to fail privately without public consequence, to develop character and competence away from the distorting pressure of external observation and expectation. This kind of unobserved development often produces a depth and stability that immediate early visibility would have made considerably more difficult to cultivate, because visibility itself introduces pressures that can distort and accelerate development in ways that do not always produce genuinely sustainable growth. This suggests that the season of feeling overlooked, however painful, may actually be serving a protective and formative function rather than representing pure loss or wasted time disconnected from any meaningful purpose. If increase had arrived prematurely, before the necessary internal development had genuinely occurred, the resulting position might have proven unsustainable, collapsing under pressures that a more fully developed character and competence would have been able to withstand. The obscurity of being currently overlooked, then, can be understood not as evidence that increase is being permanently withheld, but as evidence that the specific timing of increase is being carefully calibrated to a moment when genuine readiness will actually be capable of sustaining what is eventually provided, rather than merely being handed to someone before requisite preparation has had adequate time to occur. There is also something significant about how the experience of being consistently overlooked tends to cultivate a particular quality of humility and dependence that visible success, arriving too early, often fails to produce. A person who has experienced repeated seasons of being passed over develops, often without fully realizing it, a genuine reliance on something beyond their own visible achievement to sustain their sense of worth and purpose. This reliance, forged through the difficulty of extended obscurity, often produces a person far better equipped to handle eventual increase with appropriate humility and perspective than someone who experienced visible success immediately, without ever having to develop this deeper foundation of worth independent from external recognition. This does not mean the pain of being overlooked should be minimized or treated as simply a fortunate blessing in disguise, because genuine pain deserves genuine acknowledgement rather than premature reframing that dismisses its real difficulty. But it does suggest that this pain, however real, is not disconnected from a broader process of preparation that ultimately serves the person's capacity to receive and sustain the increase that is eventually coming. Consider also how patience itself functions not merely as passive endurance, but as an active discipline that continues developing capacity throughout the season of waiting, even when that development remains entirely invisible to external observers, and often even to the person experiencing it themselves. Patience, properly understood, is not simply the absence of complaint during difficult waiting. It is an active cultivation of trust, character, and readiness that continues building throughout the duration of the wait, regardless of how long that wait extends or how discouraging the lack of visible progress might feel in any given moment. This active quality of patience matters because it suggests that the waiting season is not empty time disconnected from the eventual increase being prepared, but is instead directly contributing to the formation of exactly the character and capacity that eventual increase will require in order to be genuinely sustainable once it finally arrives. There is a particular temptation during extended seasons of feeling overlooked to interpret the passage of time itself as evidence that positioning for increase has quietly failed, that whatever process was supposedly at work has simply stalled out or been abandoned altogether. This temptation grows stronger the longer the season of obscurity extends, particularly when comparison with others who seem to be experiencing more visible. Immediate progress intensifies the sense of being specifically and personally overlooked while others advance. This comparison, while understandable, often distorts accurate perception because it assumes that everyone's timeline for increase should follow a similar trajectory, when in reality, the specific timing and process required for each individual's genuine readiness varies considerably based on factors entirely unique to their own particular formation and calling. Someone else's more visible, apparently faster progress does not indicate that our own less visible process has failed. It simply indicates that different individuals require different lengths and different forms of preparation before their own specific increase becomes appropriate to release. This understanding should temper the corrosive effect that comparison tends to produce during extended seasons of feeling overlooked, replacing anxious measurement against others' apparently faster progress with a more settled trust in the unique timeline appropriate to our own specific formation and eventual increase. This does not mean comparison never produces useful information, or that we should never examine whether our own effort, preparation, or approach requires genuine adjustment. But it does mean that the simple fact of someone else's apparently faster visible progress does not by itself constitute evidence that our own process has failed or that increase has been permanently withheld from us specifically. Different timelines reflect different formation requirements, not different levels of favor or different ultimate destinies regarding whether increase will eventually arrive. There is also something worth considering about how the language of being positioned for increase suggests active, ongoing preparation happening specifically and intentionally rather than random, aimless waiting disconnected from any coherent process or purpose. Positioning implies deliberate placement, careful arrangement, intentional preparation for a specific eventual outcome that has already been determined even though its timing has not yet arrived. This language should offer meaningful reassurance to anyone currently experiencing the pain of feeling overlooked, because it suggests that even the current season of apparent invisibility is not disconnected from purposeful movement toward eventual increase. The overlooked season is not the absence of process. It is, quite specifically, part of the process itself, a stage of deliberate positioning that precedes and prepares for the increase that has already been determined, even though its specific timing remains, for now, hidden from view. This reframing invites a particular posture of patient, active faithfulness during seasons of feeling overlooked, a posture that continues showing up, continues developing genuine competence and character, continues faithfully stewarding whatever current responsibilities exist, precisely because this ongoing faithfulness is understood as contributing directly to the positioning process rather than being disconnected from it. Rather than viewing the current season as simply time to be endured until something better eventually arrives through processes entirely separate from present faithfulness, this understanding suggests that present faithfulness itself is actively participating in the very positioning that will eventually culminate in visible increase. This transforms the experience of the waiting season from passive endurance into active participation, even though the specific fruits of that participation remain for now largely invisible to external observation. Understanding that being currently overlooked does not equate to being permanently forgotten, and that genuine positioning for eventual increase is actively occurring even during seasons that feel entirely stagnant and unrecognized, ultimately offers sustaining hope to anyone currently walking through the particular pain of feeling passed over, unnoticed, or undervalued, despite genuine faithfulness and genuine competence. This understanding does not eliminate the real difficulty of extended obscurity, nor does it suggest that the pain of being overlooked should be minimized or dismissed as somehow secretly beneficial without acknowledgement of its genuine difficulty. But it does offer a framework within which that difficulty can be endured with genuine hope rather than resigned despair, trusting that the current season of invisibility is not evidence of permanent forgottenness, but is instead active, purposeful positioning for an increase that has already been determined and is steadily, if invisibly, being prepared, waiting only for its appointed and specifically calibrated moment to finally unmistakably arrive.